Welcome to the podcast today, everybody. Thanks for being here. Before we get started, just want to make a couple housekeeping items really quick. Again, make sure you follow us on our social media pages. We're on Instagram. We do have a TikTok. I haven't done too much with it, but I want to get more clips and stuff posted on there, so make sure you check out TikTok. YouTube. I'd love for people to kind of get drawn to YouTube a little bit more. You can see this in video with the audio as well, right? And then we can start conversations in the comments. Love to kind of interact with the audience in that way. And then if you're listening audio only on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. Let me know how I'm doing. Again, I'm kind of solo for a little bit, so forgive this kind of awkward transition phase, but just wanted to get the ball rolling and get it started again, up and running. So, again, if you can support the podcast financially, that'd be great. Check out the link tree that I have posted in the show notes for that. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. All right, today I wanted to, take it a little bit more lighthearted. I got no notes in front of me. I'm just kind of going off the memory. I wanted to just reminisce on my mission a little bit with you. The reason this is on my mind lately is I talked to a companion of mine just on the phone 3 days ago. And we were just kind of talking about the mission experience. He has also decided to leave the church. And so, we talked for an hour just kind of about stuff we'd gone through on the mission before, after, so forth. Similarities, and just wanted to reminisce a little bit with you, if you don't mind. So, if you didn't hear in one of my earlier episodes, I kind of mentioned it a little bit, kind of off the cuff, or I think it's where we're talking about the mission experience, me and Garrett. I went to Africa. I went to a little nation called Cabo Verde. And, it's 10 little islands off the west coast. If you know where Senegal is, kind of the curved part of Africa on the west side. If you go right in the middle of that curve and straight out about 300 miles into the ocean, that's where I was. No one lived on those islands until the 1400s, and that's when the Portuguese mainly came down on, and they kind of used this as a halfway point between Portugal and Brazil. A lot of slave trade kind of went through that area, so people from West Africa were brought over, oftentimes against their will, right? And some were moved down to South America, North America, wherever, but some were also stayed in the area. There was a lot of, interbreeding between Portuguese people and West Africans. And so the people there are just some of those beautiful people you've ever met. They've got dark skin for the most part, darker complexions, but then they also will sometimes have blue or green eyes. And just this mixture. And I think they're really beautiful people. They're great people. They speak a Creole. A lot of people are familiar with Cajun Creole, Louisiana and Haiti, which is a blend of different languages, mainly French, and then also some African languages, I believe. We have our own Creole in the United States, if you didn't know. It's called Pidgin. It's spoken in Hawaii. Basically, Creole is just a term that means it's this kind of middle language where you're taking two different languages and kind of putting them together and creating this own new language. And they usually don't grow very much. They're kind of localized to where they are. So I learned Portuguese in the MTC, and that's what the Book of Mormon and scriptures were written in, was Portuguese. That's the official language of the country. But it's most people's second language there is Portuguese. Their first language is this Creole, which sounds a lot like Portuguese sometimes, but then there's other aspects that are not like it at all. And a lot of Brazilians would serve their mission there. And they were just I have no idea what people are saying, So often what would happen is I would speak in Portuguese, they would speak in Creole, and we would understand each other in that aspect. So especially like older generations, people learn Portuguese in school, and in the more common era, like Portuguese is more of the common language, more and more so, but still like people are very, Cabo Verdeans are very proud of the fact that they have their own language called Creole. But because there's 10 islands, every island has their own version of Creole. So it can be really difficult as a missionary getting transferred around every 6 weeks or so often and having to like relearn a language in a lot of ways. Especially the northern islands have their own and the southern islands have their own, and they're pretty different actually. So I spent most of my time in the southern islands, then I went to the north towards the end of my mission, and I had no idea what people were saying for the most part. So super unique experience. Really loved it in a lot of ways. I was a little bit older when I went. I left shortly after my 22nd birthday. And for a Utah boy, at least, that's not very common. Most missionaries around here leave when they're 18, right after high school kind of thing. Especially since the age change back in 2012 happened. That happened my senior year of high school. So I left when I was a little bit older. There's different reasons for that I won't get into right now, but kind of decided to, quote unquote, turn my life around later on and decided to go on a mission, right? And I learned a lot out there. My personality completely changed. Like, if you've taken those 16 personality tests or whatever, you'll kind of get like 4 different ENJP or something like that. There's like 16 different combinations you can get. So, but there's like 4 main groups and then like 4 subtypes within those 4 groups. So before my mission, I was like in this one group, and then I completely switched groups afterwards. And I've retaken the test. I retook it a couple times before, a couple times after. Maybe it's not quite validated or something, but like my mission changed me in a lot of ways. It made me more serious. It made me more committed, I guess you could say, to the church, to people, and seeing a different culture, a drastically different culture from what I grew up in. To be in a predominantly white area growing up, white people around me, and then going to a place that was predominantly black people was just a big difference as well. And so a lot of culture shock at the beginning. Food was different. I want to call Cape Verde like third world. It's a developing nation for sure. A lot of poverty still. And so seeing people living in houses as big as this room I'm sitting in and being content about that and being happy and having their own little family and figuring things out, it just really put a lot of things into perspective for me. And like coming home and, I want this big house, I want this nice car, whatever. And just like, do I really? Like, I don't need that. I really don't need that. So I don't know. A lot of good experiences out there. A lot of profound experiences. A lot of difficult times, man. You work like a dog as a missionary. You are working from 6:30 in the morning until 10 at night, 10:30 when you go to sleep. Very controlled, very rigorous. Recognizing it now more, I talked about this in an earlier episode. Like, is the church a cult, quote unquote? And I don't agree with that statement. I think there's cult-like aspects maybe, but to call it a cult, I think is, at least the word has the wrong connotation with it. We think it means something else, which I don't think the church is necessarily. But the mission can be one of the more cult-like experiences in the church. It's very controlled. You have a lot of rules you need to follow. There's very much this culture of we're going to follow the rules, and if somebody isn't, that's not good, right? And they may be, in a sense, punished for it. There was nothing major, but like lower leadership status, so forth. Something that I went through personally, actually, at times. So yeah, it's very, very high demand at the very least. But also so beautiful. I have such a strange relationship of thinking about my mission now, One thing that that caused me a lot of thought, I guess you could say, is the church's previous history with black individuals and how they were not allowed to go to the temple. Men were not allowed to hold the priesthood until 1978, which was, not even 50 years ago. Very recent, grand scheme of things. Church is almost 200 years old, so 3/4 of that time, black people were not fully accepted in the church, and they could not fully enjoy the aspects that white members could, and people of other races. And so learning more about that after I got home and realizing that when I was out there teaching people that I never brought that up, I think is kind of a disservice. I think that those people had the right to know why they weren't fully accepted and before, and that we have a muddy history with that, to say the least. Muddy, right? So I don't know, there's that aspect. And then, learning more about church history from my own standpoint, and I'm going to be vague about this, right, because of the rules I have for myself, but just learning more about Joseph Smith's story, and there's like so much more to it than what we teach in the first lesson. There's so much more to his story, and we kind of like focus it down to this like 30-minute thing and tell people the very basic history, not much of the circumstances around his life, growing up, things that were happening with his family and so forth. And then we just ask people to pray about it, to read the Book of Mormon, and if they feel something, to go off of that and, commit to being baptized. I guess I just find it interesting how little people know when they often do get baptized. And in Africa, the church is exploding in a lot of ways. That's where most of the converts these days are coming from. Ironically, given our history, right, with Africans, or those of African descent. For me personally, most of the people I taught did not stay active. So it was very much a quick commitment kind of thing. And they may still be considered members according to the church, but maybe they don't consider themselves members anymore. That was like 80%, 90% of the people I taught, as far as I'm aware. And I think most people, in my mission at least, would probably agree with that. And anyway, reflecting on my own experience of leaving the church, I thought it was interesting. I had some people express to me, like, you're making a rash decision. You're jumping out of this, like, too fast. And I felt like I took my time with it, from the time I very first started to doubt things in December of 2021 until the time I removed my name officially was 18 months, about. Even from the time of like first starting to doubt to saying, like telling myself like, no, like I don't believe this anymore. That was a 6-month experience. And even after that, I was still trying to hold on and plead for God for a sign of some sorts. And it didn't really happen. I was still praying. I was still trying to read my scriptures. I attended another institute class as a non-believer, just kind of giving like one more shot, like not taking this like lightheartedly. And eventually I was just like, I could try to stay in my entire life and just plead and hope for that there's an answer coming one day, or maybe I can decide to step away for a little bit and see how things go. And still like have this hope that maybe there will be an answer from God, which I'm still waiting for to this day. But I'm also not like proactively seeking it out. So some people in the church might criticize that and say, well, you're not doing the things. It's like, well, okay, I get that. But I also felt like I was. And to compare that to people who joined the church, I baptized people within 3-4 weeks of them even first hearing about it, with basically no idea what they're getting into. Sometimes people would think about, I had missionaries reach out to me on the mission saying like, do you worry that we're like baptizing people to hell in a way? And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, well, like there's this scripture in D&C that says that, once you have this greater light and knowledge, you're accountable for that. And we baptize people and we know that they don't often stay active. Maybe a few do. Does that justify this? And so are we giving people more light and knowledge and now they're going to be held accountable to that at the final judgment? It might have been better if they never joined and, they join in the afterlife according to the theology. And I was just kind of like, okay, maybe. So I don't know, just comparing my own experience leaving the church and how it was this very long, drawn-out, thoughtful process as compared to people joining the church where it's this very quick, like, let's get them in the water. At least where I was, it's kind of this stark contrast, and I just find that interesting that people are kind of judging me for leaving, quote-unquote, so quickly, when people join very quickly, So just kind of something that has been on my mind. But then I wanted to end kind of talking about what I think the church does for people in good aspects, especially where I was. So when I was there, October conference of 2018, I was like a month and a half away from coming home, and President Nelson announced that there would be a temple built in Cabo Verde, and this would be the first temple up until now. Before the temple was built, faithful members of the church in the islands, they would fly and stay like a week in Brazil, this temple in Brazil, Recife, I think. And that's where they would get sealed. They would often do like a civil marriage in the country, right? And then get sealed later, a year later or so, in the temple. With their families and so forth. They would stay there and kind of do like a whole week of temple work for their ancestors. And so big trip, big commitment, expensive as well. I think the church did help pay for some of it, if I recall correctly. Anyway, so I was just about to come home and the temple was announced and everybody was just ecstatic, crazy. There we were watching General Conference as like a stake, like meeting house completely full of people, from members from all around the city. And people were just like yelling, screaming, like they were just so happy that a temple was coming to them rather than them having to go to the temple. One of the bishops, I felt like he had just, like the way he reacted was just like he shot the winning 3-point shot in this basketball game, like with the buzzer beater kind of thing, and just like championship, and he's just like, whoo, going crazy about it. And so I told myself, I'm like, I want to come back for that. I want to be here for the temple dedication. And so that happened in the summer of 2022. And I'm in the middle of my faith crisis at this point. So I'm like, do I go? Like, I don't really know I don't think I believe this stuff anymore, but like, I've already bought the tickets. Or the plane tickets, booked at the Airbnb and whatever. I was like, I think I'll still go. So me and my wife went, and as a non-believer, I'm sitting there, at the temple dedication, and just feeling so grateful for this experience for these people, and they are truly happy that this is coming to them, and that it's something that they will be able to have for themselves. And the church teaches that this is an eternal ordinance that's needed, sealing baptisms for the dead, so forth, like all this endowment. And I was just grateful to be there, like listening to, it was Elder Anderson who dedicated it, Neil Anderson. And yeah, just sitting there in the moment, enjoying it, and seeing true happiness on people's faces, and not questioning that necessarily, and being like, they think they're happy, but if only they knew, or whatever. And going to members' houses for like a family night, a family home evening kind of thing, and just seeing how the church brought them structure in their lives, maybe that they didn't have before they joined. And this network and the sense of community that they maybe didn't have before. And, there's things like BYU Pathways that can help people get education. And I just really kind of came away from that experience, like thinking to myself, like, the church does a lot of good for these people, and I can recognize that, and two things are true. Maybe I wish that we taught things differently to people, and that they knew a little bit more of what they were getting into. I have feelings about tithing, and how these people who have pretty much nothing are being asked to give their 10%, So it was just a great experience being there, being a missionary, experiencing another culture, coming back to it several years later, right, with my wife, and with a completely different view on things. I'd love to go back again, because I'm at a different spot now, 3 years later, than I was at the time for the temple dedication. But it was, just something I think about every so often, and I'm sure I've talked to other, I mentioned I was on the phone with an old companion of mine who had left as well, and he felt similarly. It was this great experience, and now people that we taught maybe have left the church, but I see that that was an important step in their journey to where they are now. And I can just be grateful for that, and not sad for them that they are more or less missing out on eternal blessings or whatever, because I just see that they're happy where they are and doing the best they can in the circumstances that they have. And yeah, good times. I know other ex-Mormons who have similar feelings about their missions. This kind of weird balance of things is like, I really didn't like it and hated it for so many different reasons, especially looking back on it now, but also appreciating what it did for me. And what I was able to do for other people and serve them. So it's such a unique aspect of LDS culture, serving a mission. And I want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment. What did your mission do to you? What did you learn? You resonate with anything that I said today? And I know this is kind of me reflecting more on my experiences as an ex-member, but I hope believing members can see that these are the thoughts that have gone through my head, and just at least recognize them, like say, hey, that's valid, I loved my mission president. Such a good man. Had the privilege to be working alongside him at the end of my mission as his assistant, and just got to know him on a deeper level, and yeah, just the things he did to help me and the other 150 so missionaries that were there at a time. Just good people. I've met so many good people throughout my life, and I just appreciate what they've done in my journey, and people have expressed to me how I've helped them with theirs in some cases, and just really grateful for that. So thanks for letting me reminisce a little bit with y'all. Hope to see you on the next one.